This is my shirt. Oh yeah, that's my man.
I know, right?
Marty Walsh, how you doing?
I'm good.
You're the Bostonian these days.
I'm a Bostonian in location, but in heart, I'm still a freaking San Fernando Valley boy, you know? You can take the boy out of Hollywood, but you can't take the Hollywood out of the boy. I'm sorry. I'll never be a New Englander, man. It doesn't work for me. It's just park the car, have it, yeah, all that
Oh,
shit.
oh, okay. Well,
But I'm here.
So thanks for joining me today. You just mentioned the San Fernando Valley. Start with Marty Walsh.
I was one of a whole bunch of people that were lucky enough to be around at a time when music was just exploding, as you know. Of course, you see the Beatles when you're a little kid, you go, wow. But my father was a musician. He played gigs. He played society parties. He had the Gene Walsh Trio. He would wake up at 2 p.m, go to work at 7 p.m, and come home at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. And I had two older brothers that were musicians, and they were both involved in the scene really early. My brother John had a record deal with Warner Records when he was 19 years old. He was a great singer, but the military came calling, and so his career got derailed. And my other brother was 4 years older than me. Dan was a great guitar player. And fortunately for me, when I was a kid, his band used to rehearse. They were called the Go-Go's. And Jay Graydon, who I'm sure you know, was the bass player in the band. So I meet Jay when I'm 12. Jay had a brother that was playing guitar, and I started a band with his brother. I mean, it's like we're young kids.
Pretty cool family to be hooked up with that early.
The idea of being a musician was viable. It was like, oh, my father can do it. My brother's doing it. And so I just figured I can do this. And so I started playing drums. And when I was about 15, my brother Dan said, look, you're a Walsh, man. Sell the kit and get a guitar. Which I did. So to start at 15 was pretty late, but I just worked my ass off. That's all I wanted to do, of course, was play guitar. I mean, just much like you, I'm sure. Once you bit the bug, it's like, that's all I'm going to do with my time. And the other thing that was really kind of fortunate was my brother Dan would come home and he would talk about these studio musicians that had played on his demos. Even my brother John, who had gotten out of the service and was a writer for Irving Elmo publishing for A&M Records.
Wow, just like Allie. We'll have to talk about that later.
Yeah. So they used to talk about this guy, Hal Blaine, and like Glenn Campbell. My brother go, oh my God, Glenn Campbell played this solo on this. I don't know who these people were. I mean, I remember the names. And as I started to get older, now I'm in my 20s. And by this time, I've gone to Valley College with Scott Page and Dan Sawyer and Greg Matheson. I saw that there was a lifespan to careers early on. That was the thing that was ingrained in me from a young age, because once I got into like my 20s and I kind of knew who the up and coming studio guys were, I realized that all of the old studio guys were gone. They were done. That whole wrecking crew from the 60s, because your style's over. The young crop comes up. Carlton, Jim Gordon, Keltner, Louis Shelton. I mean, those guys were the 70s session players.
And Robin Ford.
Robin Ford, yeah. So I was just very fortunate to be able to look. When did you move to LA?
I moved to LA in 1973, coming back to Sacramento after doing college up there and stage band and, very little recording up there. I mean, I just felt like I could come down to LA and I read notation and I was going to take over the world,
Yeah, of course.
And then I went to CSUN and to join the big band there. And I get this phone call and the guy goes, I know you signed up to class, but you still have to audition. I go, what are you talking about? I'm Kenny Lee Lewis, man. I play like a L4 with Johnny Smith pickups. I'm doing like Wes Montgomery thumb technique. Why do I need to audition? He goes, you'll see. So I end up coming to the audition, and in the hallway, there's like 50 guys that are my age now, with like L7s and like, beards, and like they all want to play in the big band because they want to play heads on Buddy Rich tunes along with the trumpets, Yeah. And so I go in there and they go, okay, Cherokee, 230, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. And they would have me read this chart and I'm like going, wait a minute, hold on. Can I look at this for a second? No. All right, well, let's go. And I start reading. And of course, I'm falling all over myself. And then I eventually said, well, I play bass too. And they said, okay, well, here's a bass chart. And I read that. And they gave me a couple of weeks later the C band. I could play the bass in the C band. So I just said, screw it. But that was what was going on in those days. All the musicians, like you say, the older cats, they weren't really recording that much because, they didn't play all the distortion and the wah-wah stuff like we did. They grew up playing jazz. So they could read and they could do like a burger commercial or something, but they just couldn't get on the new pop stuff. So they had kind of moved on. So then enter Marty Walsh.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned the C band because I was at Berklee College and I did 3 semesters and I started my 4th and I went to Dick Carlson. I says, Dick, I want to be in the A band. I got to make the A band. And he said, well, Dan Sawyer is coming back. And Dan Sawyer used to play saxophone in the A band. He goes, Dan's coming back to play guitar. That's all he said. Like, I'm out. And so I quit. I like, okay, screw that, because I'd only played in the B band. I said, that's it. I'm not doing another semester of the B band, But fortunately for me, Dan Sawyer was very important to me because Dan was gigging with the Osmond family a few years later.
Wow.
He's on the road. And then there was a guy named John Rosenberg, you may know. He's a contractor guy. And John had this gig with this group, the DeFranco family. And Dan recommended me for that gig. And so when I'm 22, I'm on the road. I'm making $600 a week playing freaking,
Damn!
It was cool. And I'm playing the Six Flags kind of summer tour stuff. They had this little kid who was 12 years old, Tony DeFranco, who became a contractor in LA and started hiring me for sessions when I was in my 40s. It was crazy. And then he recommended me for the gig with Eddie Kendricks of The Temptation.
Wow.
And I'm on the road with Eddie back when I'm 23. I'm on the road with 3 guys from the Motown school, like from Detroit that played on those records. Uriel Jones, the drummer.
Right.
And Eddie Willis, the guitarist. They were session cats and they were playing with Eddie. And there's 3 of us from LA and we're out there playing these gigs, man. And it was quite a look into the difference in cultures in America, going into towns where there wasn't a lot of money. There wasn't a lot of stuff, man. The Black experience, it was a trip. It was I'm just this young Caucasian kid from Burbank, Glendale. And all of a sudden, at 2 a.m, I'm hanging out in the freaking hood in Atlanta. It was
Diane's
wild.
mother, you've probably seen on Facebook recently. I was talking about Diane's mother. She used to hire Uriel Jones, James Jamerson, Fred White, and Earl Van Dyke to play her fashion shows and stuff at the Chit Chat Lounge in Detroit. But that's who Diane and her family all grew up with. So you got to, it's such a small world, 6 stages of separation. There you are, you're playing with the Motown cats.
I'll tell you something, man. As well as I do, we're 23, 24, whatever, and we're playing with our friends in the garage or whatever. I get to this gig with Uriel Jones, man. And we do this rehearsal. We started out with this kind of a small gig at a Playboy Club. I think it was in Chicago. Let's get the thing kind of up and running with these new guys. It was a new thing from LA. And man, he counts off Boogie Down. We had all shedded our parts, right? So I knew the bit, don't. He goes 1, 2, 3, 4. And he comes in with this groove that's just, it just took your breath away. It was like, oh my God, like what is going on? This guy, boom, down, boom. Just the aggression and the conviction of his playing, whew. It was like, get on my train, guy. Come on, kid, you're coming with me, man. It's hard not to go. Boom, doom, did, do. I got the guitar right here.
Okay.
Can you hear that? It's like, it just played itself. It's like I talk about Jeff Beccaro on the same. It was just shocking to be 23 years old and playing with someone that had that level of conviction, in what he did.
Did you feel that like he had control of your hands some way and you were just sort of like disconnected and he played the guitar for you? That's the way it was when I played bass with Beccaro. My hands would not be of my own anymore. He would control them and I would just be watching it. And I'd be going, oh my God, he's controlling my hands.
We're very, very fortunate people that were able to actually play live with that guy.
Yeah.
To play with Jeff. The first time I played with Jeff, I was 19 years old. He was 17. We jammed together at some jam thing. And then he invited me over to this other rehearsal he was doing with Kerry Morris and Scott Shelley and Steve Edwards. And then we did a session in 78 together. But man, there was something about that guy. And it wasn't just and you can't explain it.
You were getting some of that from Uriel Jones, though, before you even...
Oh, yeah. Uriel was just dragging my ass along.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It's like, when the drummer's on like that, man, everybody just follows. And it's like an out-of-body experience almost.
Yeah, the drummer is everything. The drummer is the foundation of the whole bit. I had a shirt made one time, man. I got it upstairs. that said, "Life's too short to play with bad drummers."
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah. So now you're in your 20s and you're starting to get recommended. You've met Sawyer, you've met Graydon.
Yeah.
What happens next?
Well, after the Kendricks thing, I got the Seals and Crofts gig. You know Bill Como, right?
Yep.
So Bill had a band called Bonnaroo that was on Warner Records, and Bonnaroo did an album, toured, and the lead singer's main songwriter quit. I knew Bill because he was getting me on some demos with a guy named Dallas Smith, a record producer. And I still wasn't, really ready yet to be like a session guy necessarily. But anyway, they had this band. Michael Hossack was in the band, who was with the Doobie Brothers, and he had left the Doobies to start this thing. Bobby Leidig was the bass player who had played with Seals and Crofts. And Billy asked me to play on these demos. He said, look, if you want to do this thing with this band, Warner's, they want to hear some more music because we've lost our main songwriter singer. So they got this vocalist named Flip, and they got me, and we recorded a bunch of demos in Seals and Crofts' garage studio in 75, maybe early 76. And Seals and Crofts heard those. Warner Records turned them down. And Jimmy and Dash said, we'll hire those guys that were in the freaking garage, So all of a sudden, Bobby Leidig, his band Bonnaroo is done. So they bring in Bill and they bring in Michael and myself. They didn't need the singer. And we did some rehearsing, and Michael Hossack was great, but he was a lot like Levon Helm. He was kind of loose. He's one of those loosey-goosey dudes. Mm-hmm. And Jim Seals was like metronomic, Jeff Porcaro was the drummer in the tour before. They were doing this new band. They were redoing stuff, and they had a big hit out called Get Closer, it was called. So I told him, I said, look, they got rid of Hossack. And I said, look, if you want the guy who's going to be clocked, get Ralph Humphrey. So we called Ralph. He came in, he nailed it, and we went on the road. So I did that. Then the next year, I went out on the road with them again. And now interspersed with this road stuff with the DeFrancos and Kendricks and the Seals and Crofts, I would do these casuals, we call them in LA, right? And man, I just hated them. I mean, I just loathed them. But it was a great experience as a young guy because I could work on the weekends and make enough money to live. And I didn't have to work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I could do Saturday and Sunday and make enough bread,
Yeah, you just had to have a tux and know the American Songbook, that's all.
Right. And then after the second Seals and Crofts tour, I had piled up all this cash. I had just saved my money. Like I had a beat up old V-Dub I was driving. I spent money on nothing. I had this funky little crash pad I'm living in. And Shirley from the Scott Allen agency called me in September when the tour was over and said, Marty, you got your book? And I said, yeah, but you're not going to be in it. I said, I'm done, Shirley. No more casuals. I can't do it. Thank you very much. You've been wonderful for the last 7 years or 5 years or 6 or whatever. Yeah. I said, you've been great, but I'm retiring from casuals. I just can't do it anymore.
Yeah. I was doing Lionel Ames in those days.
Lionel Ames? Are you kidding? Oh my God. Lionel Ames. At the Temple Bethel, man.
I know. I'm going to rewind just a little bit to get the connection between you and I. So Jeff Lieb and I were doing a thing with Ralph Humphrey about 74 through 75. And then through Jeff, he and I were trying to put a band together, and we met Gary Ferguson, this drummer that he knew. And through Gary, he invited me to start coming to these demo sessions that we were doing for Allie Willis over at Irving Alamo, which you had mentioned earlier that your brother was involved with. And I think that's where I met you, unless you have a different story.
Well, you weren't involved with the Me Brown thing, right? Up in Malibu.
Correct. That thing was going on for a couple of years. They had Graydon in there. They had Bill Bodine.
Yeah.
They had Ira. They had Jay Graydon. I mean, I came in after they finally said, screw this. There's no money in rehearsing. But Meade took a liking to me. And Ralph was still involved because he was doing that stuff with Rocky. Through that, I invited Jeff Lieb, who is now Jeff Paris, to come be our lead singer on a song called Mercenary Man, another one called Enjoy Yourself. And through Jeff is how I met Gary. And I think Gary was the one that turned me on to the Allie demo sessions. And I think that's when you and I met.
I mean, when did we start doing sessions for Allie? That was like 77, 78 in there, right?
Correct. Yeah, because I'd already met Diane and we were already working on her album, and I'd already played with Jeff and Jay Graydon on her album. Things were just snowballing then. And we hired Gary to be Diane's drummer in her touring band. And so we got close. And so that's how he started inviting me and turned me on to sessions.
Yeah, that was a fun time, man.
It
Those
was.
sessions at A&M Studio C. And we'd be in Studio C at what, 10 o'clock in the morning, or was it earlier? I don't
I think it
know.
was 9.
It was like early. And we'd be in there with David Lasley and Arnold McCullough and Allie. And I mean, you know.
We had Dave Benoit was one of
Yeah.
the keyboard players. We had
Yeah.
Robbie Buchanan, Todd Robinson,
Yeah.
you, me, Gary Ferguson. I'm trying to think of some of the other cats that would play on that stuff. But yeah, man, I mean, we were getting $35 a track,
Right.
and, barely awake. I mean, we had other help to keep us awake.
Not at 9 o'clock in the morning for me, man. I was still struggling from the night before, probably. But the funny thing is too, man, is that we were in Studio C, and then every now and then there'd be some big session in like Studio A.
It'd be the Carpenters or Supertramp or somebody,
Like Jim Gordon's in Studio A today, and like we're over here banging away in Studio C on some demo,
Yeah.
But it's all good, it's where we cut our teeth, man.
That rhythm section, if I'm not mistaken, played on the demos of Boogie Wonderland and September and Lead Me On and all the tunes that Allie had hits with. Were you on any of those? I'm trying to remember. Okay.
Yeah, I was on Boogie Wonderland. I remember doing it, man, and I think Todd Robinson was on the session, or maybe it was you.
I might have, but I can't remember.
I just remember all of us looking at each other going, what a freaking lame tune. Wonderland? Like, that's what we're going to call this? You're going to call this Boogie Wonderland? Really?
Yeah, she was co-writing with Desmond Child and co-writing with, of course, David. And I think even Luther Vandross was in there one day with us. Yeah. I can't remember. But yeah, it was quite a little machine that was going on there. And we were all there. I have one photo from those days that I cherish, which is Janice Williams, Melissa Manchester, Allie Willis. Allie's trying to talk about a bass line, and I'm standing in the back, and I'm like going like this, like, okay, when you girls decide what you want me to play, I'm ready to play.
Wow.
So back to you. So now we're doing the Allie sessions, but this is 1977 now, 78.
Yeah. So what I did I left Seals and Crofts. They called me back for 78. They said, we want to get you back, but you never worked with them. They had this plane, right?
No.
They had this airplane. It was called Thunderfoot. And we did a really great instrumental piece in 76 called Thunderfoot. I had a really nice solo on their live album, this first record I ever played on when they had this plane. And Mike Picaro called me before I took the gig. Mike called and he says, Marty, you got to know about this plane. So I go, okay, Mike, thanks for the heads up. So this plane was dodgy. We called it Flying in the Oily Skies, because it just dripped oil constantly. And you'd get out of the plane, you'd land somewhere to go to the gig and there'd be freaking oil freaking dripping out of the engine. Anyway, there were these horror stories about this plane that we had heard in the past, but so far so good. So one night, now this is in 77, the second band is at end of the tour. We're just finishing up some things. We got to make that West Coast run from like Vancouver down to San Diego. You know that one, right? Flying to Phoenix, Arizona. And we get on this plane. Just the band gets on this plane after a gig at Purdue, Indiana, Purdue University. The keyboard player's got a bottle of tequila. And there were some other things on the plane that were a little crazy. And so we're like party time, man. Woo! It's just the band members, just us. And so, because, usually they have Seals and Crofts are there and the management and, sometimes there's some of the road crew. So I pass out. I'm gone. I'm like dead to the world. And I wake up and the sun's shining and we're landing. And I walk up to the cabin to the front and I go, hey, Pete, who was the pilot? I go, oh, we're landing in Phoenix. He goes, no, we're landing in Dallas. And we've already landed twice. I don't know, 2 or 3 times. Because at 14,000 feet, smoke filled the cabin. We've started a fire on the we popped an oil seal. Smoke fills the cabin. Steve Alitzky is freaking out, going, oh my God. He runs up to Pete. Pete goes, oh shit, dives the plane down to 6,000 feet. I sleep through this whole thing.
Oh my God.
Dives the plane down to 6 feet. This story gets better, man. Hang on. Down to 6,000 feet so we can turn off the pressure system and just let the clean air come in, right? So we can breathe the air, I guess. So anyway, so we're landing in Dallas. And he tells me this story and I'm going, oh God. And everybody else that was awake was like, frazzled. Anyway, we have to get a hotel. We look like crap. We just freaking played the tequila, the thing, the plane ride, all night. We're in Dallas. We show up at this hotel and this guy goes, what are you guys, like musicians or something? We go, yeah. And he goes, we're Seals and Crofts band. He says, oh, did you hear about Leonard Skinner last night? And we go, no. Leonard Skinner went down the same night in the same plane.
Oh,
They had a 1952 Convair that went down on the same night that that happened to us,
oh my
right?
God.
I go to my
Wow.
hotel room and I go, United Airlines, just book me. I'm never getting on this thing again. I booked all the rest of my flights. Then they called me back in 78 and said they want to go on the road. And I said, look, I can't do this. I got other plans. And I called Scott Page, you know, our dear friend Scotty. He was working at the Smokehouse with his band.
Right.
Um,
That's where I met him.
so I go, look, I talked to the manager, Marcia Day. She calls me about the tour. I go, no, I can't do it. I'm not going out. But look, you can call this guy. He's got a great band. He's a great cat. Scott Page, here's his number. Hang up the phone. Hang up the phone. Dial Scott's number. And I go, Scott, I just recommended you for the Seals and Crofts gig, man. But I got to tell you about the plane. Take your chances, baby. And he did the gig for another 3 years, I think, with his
Oh
band.
my God. And I think, and with Dan Sawyer too, if I'm not mistaken, I think, because I think you
Yeah.
remember him and Dan doing it at the same time.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's like a story from Almost Famous. Remember when they were getting ready to crash and they were all like, telling their horror stories before they died?
Dude, it was crazy.
Wow, that's a great rose story, man. Thanks.
I know.
Okay, so you're doing Seals and Crofts. Are you getting recommended for more dates in town?
I'm doing the demos, man. You know, like I'm working. You mentioned Rocky Davis. He was part of a rhythm section. David Edelstein, Rocky Davis, myself, George Green. We're a rhythm section for a guy named David Fisher, who was a songwriter signed to Don Costa. And he had gotten an in with doing sound-alikes at 20th Century Fox. So we're doing those. And I'm just playing on demos. In 1978, I said, I'm not working. I'm not playing in clubs. I'm only doing sessions. The only work I'm taking is if they have one of those things, those consoles, which you plug microphones into. That's the only thing I'm going to do, right? I just refuse to take anything else.
Oh
and,
my God.
and so I made like no money. But I had all this bread, dude. I had saved up all this dough from 4 years of being on the road. I went out and I bought some guitars at Valley Arts. I got an acoustic, I got a steel string, I got a nylon string, I got my Fender Esquire, my 59 Esquire. I loaded up on some guitars because I knew I had to have those available. And I was doing demos, and my brother Dan wrote a song called Love Pains. And Yvonne Elliman was going to do it. Yvonne Elliman was she Jesus Christ Superstar?
Yeah, she's also the one, if I can't have you, I don't want nobody, baby. She had a disco hit.
So my brother Dan has got this song, Love Pains, right? And I get hired to play on this demo, and I come up with this part. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So I play on this demo, and Steve Berry, the producer, is booking the session, right? This is going to be Yvonne's single. Omardian is the arranger, Michael Omardian. They got Jeff Piccaro and Mike Piccaro booked. They got Jay Graydon booked. And they call Ben Benet, who was the second guitar player. Ben's unavailable. They call the next guy. He's unavailable. They call the next guy. They call 3 guys. And Steve Berry look, this is the way the music industry works. It's just crazy. Barry is talking to my brother, and he goes, I can't find a second guitar player for the session. Everybody I use is booked. And my brother says, well, look, why don't you hire my kid brother because you like that part he played? And Omardian literally wrote my part in the chart. Like that was the guitar part. It was going to be featured in this piece, And I got pretty good time at the time, I guess. So Steve Berry took a shot. And he goes, okay, let's just hire your brother. So I get to the session. It's at Dawnbreaker, Seals and Crofts studio. They've gone from the garage to the beautiful. It was really state of the art at the time. Everybody was using the place. It was in San Fernando. And so I knew this engineer, Joe Bogan, was going to engineer the date. He was like the staff guy at Dawnbreaker. I have a JC 120 guitar amplifier I just bought because I saw Buzzy Featon playing one. And I go, I need one of these. Then I discovered that the JC120 had a chorusing feature that did this. At the time, we had a chorus pedal you could buy on one side, try out, right? But the amp did this. So
Right.
I go to Joe Bogan. I knew him. I had done some work with Seals and Crofts. I played on their last album. And now I got this brand new amp, and I go to Joe. I go, listen, I got this amp, man. You got to put 2 mics on it. And you got to pan it left and right. Now, everybody was mono at the time, those little Princeton amps. Everybody was Princeton mono. So we do this session, and we play that track, and we go listen to playback, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, like what is this?
Widescreen.
Wide stereo guitar. What is this thing?
With one track on one take in stereo.
Yeah, 2 channels, you know. We did 2 more songs. There was a song called Green Light we did, and I had a way of playing it. It was notated by Michael Amartya, the arranger. I went like, it was in A minor, right?
Right.
And then the next bit, it was like a G chord to a D chord or something, right? He had written, this is what he had written. That's what he had written, right? And you could play it that way, but I played it like this. So I had that double stop, and then I went, instead of, I went, get that double stop again.
Right. Like an Andy Summers kind of approach.
Yeah. And so I've got the fingering down. Dude, this was the best 3 hours I ever had in the studio. Graydon is next to me over here, and he looks over the baffle. He goes, hey, how you playing that? I want to double it. So I'm showing Jay, the biggest badass guitar player in LA, Mr. Demo over here, is going, yeah, man, it's like this.
Wow.
I walk into my house, my phone's ringing, and it's Omartian's assistant asking me if I can do 2 weeks of sessions for him at Hollywood Sound for this Christian band. I think it was the Imperials or something, you know. And then the next thing that happens is Karen White, who was Steve Barry's assistant, calls me and says, oh, Marty, I got your W-2 here. You forgot to write double scale on the W-2. I'm going to put it in for you. I'm going to put it in for you. But Steve doesn't hire single scale musicians.
Oh, my God.
Write double scale every time you work for Steve.
Oh, okay. So it's kind of a class thing. I got it. A snooty elitist thing.
Yeah. I mean, dude, look, I go from like, I'm the demo guy. I'm like, we're doing Allie Willis demos. This is 1978. And then all of a sudden, in 1 3-hour session, everything changed. It was like the right date with the right equipment, with the right people. I'm an okay guitar player. That day, I was really freaking good. I had it going. It was like, I couldn't do anything wrong.
And you had the bitchin' amp that was in stereo. And then everybody started buying those CE1 choruses, like you said, the little pedal version of it. And I think that Jay even had one of those because he played on Diane's album and he had that day. And speaking of Diane's album, I had a similar experience is that I had co-written the songs with Diane and they wanted to get David Hungate to play bass on her album. And Diane put her foot down. She goes, no, he wrote all the bass parts. They're written into the charts. He's going to do the parts. He invented them. And that's how I got on that date. And that's when Bacaro and Jay and all this went, hey, he's really good, man. We should recommend him. So it was that kind of thing for me on that session.
Like you said earlier, it's a small world in the music thing.
The thing that's interesting, though, is it's coming from a writing standpoint. And that's the reason why Toto was formed, because all those cats were coming up with great shit on everybody else's records, and they weren't getting any extra writers' money or publishing from that. So they said, screw that. We're going to start our own band. We'll write our own songs, and we don't have to do these double-scale sessions anymore unless we feel like it.
Yeah, because when you're a session musician, you play on a lot of bad records. There have been projects I've done where the producer dictates parts to me, and I go, man, I don't want to play that, but you do it because the producer wants it. Pat, I've done records where I've almost just don't put my name on this because you've made me play the stuff that I just, anyway.
Yeah, I know. You're kind of like a prostitute in a way. You're getting
you're a mercenary.
Right. You're getting paid to do little tricks for a guy that's behind the glass. It's like a peep show.
So that was kind of the basis of the whole thing. And then I was just off and running after that. And then you're just getting calls. I get called to play on 9 to 5, the Dolly Parton record, which is it's like her signature piece, man. I mean, like that's her closer. I wrote it in my blog. It was just another day at the office. I get a call. Okay, you're going to go work for this producer guy, Greg Perry. Because you know how it is, Kenny. Once you get in the groove of things, your name starts floating around. People start calling you for stuff, It's like, oh, yeah, that guy. Yeah, I heard about that guy. Get that guy. So there I am on 9 to 5. I think it was Abe on it, Lenny Castro, Rick Schlosser. Buzzy Featon was playing guitar. He was in the lead fill part, and they wound up replacing him, which, happens to everybody with Skunk Baxter.
Right.
But, I had the rhythm part down, 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 don't, don't, don't. All these years later, I'm still getting checks when it's in movies, just gets used all the time, you know.
So was that probably the biggest single that you played on?
That was probably the biggest, yeah. In retrospect, I don't know how it actually did at the time, if it was number one on the pop charts. It probably was, right? I would kind of have to assume
It
so.
was huge, man. That thing exploded. It was all over the place. Did you play on Donna Summer's record? Is
Yeah.
that okay?
Yeah. She works hard for the money. This was 84 now. So I'm a little bit not long in the tooth as a studio player, but of course there's other guys that are going to start getting recognized. You know, Luke was the guy. He was like the main cat that everybody knew. We can still work. I mean, but he's going to get the biggest gigs.
Jay was really a champion for him.
Jay was a champion for everybody. I mean,
Yeah.
for a lot of us, I mean, he recommended me. After the session that I did, that Yvonne Element session, I start getting calls from other people going, yeah, Jay Graydon gave me your name, you know, and dear friend for many, many years.
We'll get him on the show eventually. We'll have him talk all this stuff because, you know, he'll go on for hours. I'll have to do part 1, 2, and 3 with him.
Yeah, I know. We had Steve Lukather at the school. And when he got to talk to him, he goes, man, you guys talk alike. You guys like sound the same. Like I go, it all came from Graydon. Graydon was the guy. He kind of like, he had a way of talking.
We all got infected by it. It was a little bit of beatnik mixed with a little bit of Sammy Davis mixed with a little bit of, I can't explain it, but it had a Rat Pack flavor, but it was kind of steeped in like jazz musicology coming from the black culture a little bit. But yeah, we all started doing that because it was kind of a cult. Now you're doing a lot of sessions. Everybody's recommending you, and then you start thinking about writing.
Well, of course, I've told people the guitar was a vehicle to make a living. I was never a guitar player that was going, oh, I'm going to be. The other day I texted Luke because I heard this song come on Spotify. It was just this random tune. And I go, who is this? You know, I'm checking it out. Obviously, these people are from Sweden. You know, you're looking at the names. You're going, oh, they're from, you know, Sweden, Denmark. They're, you know, somewhere in the Netherlands. And there's a guitar solo on there. And I listen, I go, oh, that's got to be Luke. I mean, you know, it's, you know. So I text him. I go, hey, I sent him this link. I go, hey, dude, is this you on this thing, man? Is this, you know? And he goes, I don't know. He goes, could be. It might be Dan Huff because he tried to sound a lot like me back then, right? So I text him back and I go, everybody did except me. I said, I heard the solo on Hold the Line and I said, I'll never be able to do that. I'm just going to sit here and do my rhythm guitar shit, man. I'm cool with that. The first time I met Luke is on the session for Arthur's Theme. It's Jeff, it's Hungate, O'Mardian's on keyboards. He was a producer. Bacharach. This is probably, I don't know, 83, 82, something like that, maybe earlier, 81. And there I am. And they go, yeah, you're on acoustic guitar. There was an overdub room to the right where there was a glass window where you could see into the control room. And that's where my station was, right? And then there was a door that came into the studio. And I'm there and I see Jeff, you know, and I'm like, oh, dude, you know, hey, and tuning up, getting ready for the session. And in blows Luke, man, to this door. This is how I recall it. Boom, flies open, and this guy comes freaking flying in the room, and he's just yucking it up. He's cats, you know, it's his band. It's his Hungate and Jeff, you know. And the piano was sitting directly across from me, right? And my door is open. And he sits down and he plays this classical thing on piano. And I'm sitting here going, who is this guy? Really? And I just go, okay, cool, man. I'm going to sit here. I'm going to strum my acoustic guitar. Cool. Get the check. That was my introduction to him. Yeah. And now we're like, you know, best of friends.
Wow. So speaking of writing, Diane writes this piece. She has a dream. She wakes up in the morning. She goes, I got this piece in my head. And she was with a guy named Stan Hanman at the time who knew Bud Friedman over at Evening at the Improv. Okay. And they said, well, we need a new theme song. Let's hear what you came up with. So we did a little demo. I think it was just me and her, and we sent it to them. And they said, yeah, that's great. Go in the studio and cut it. And we get a budget. And who do I call? And I call you. And we get Craig Cramp, who I've been doing the Rocky movies with and all this other stuff, you know, who was with the Robs and everybody. Great John Bonham kind of player, you know.
Right, I know Craig.
And Diane and we go into the studio. Do you remember what studio we cut that in? But we cut the theme for Evening at the Improv, which aired for years.
Yeah. You know, man, Diane has mentioned that to me, and it's like, that's one of those sessions that just went by. Like, I can't recall anything about it.
She was trying to remember the studio. She thought it was Red Wing with Tom Super, but I don't think it was Red Wing. I think it was something more in town.
What year was it? Because I could probably look it up.
I'll say 79, something like that. But anyway, she wrote that theme and they used it and they loved it. It was on Evening Improv for many years. And that made some pretty good mailbox money for her because she owned 100% of the publishing.
Well, writing was the way to go, man. You know that. I mean, I tell people I use the guitar as a vehicle, but I never wanted to spend all of my time cultivating my guitar chops. I was trying to write a hit. That was the point. My brother was writing hits, and I saw what it did for him. He bought his first house in Woodland Hills on his first hit. Dude, I mean, this is where you want to be. You want to be in publishing land and make money, right? Airplay. That's the gig. It always seemed to me that the biggest cats were able to move from live to sessions to producing, writing, or business, like the bass player guy, American Idol. He went and got a gig with A&R department in Warner Brothers or something, didn't he?
Oh, you're talking about the guy that played on my song, Why Kind of Fell in Love, Randy Jackson.
Growing up, I mentioned this very early on in our discussion. I saw that there was this kind of lifespan to these musicians. You're constantly trying to get to that point where you're improving and doing bigger stuff. So I spent all my time writing songs.
Well, thanks a lot, everyone, for tuning into this episode of Fret Friends with the great Marty Walsh, who was a very active studio musician, guitar player, writer back in the 70s and 80s when we used to work together. I'm just so glad he was able to find time from Berklee School of Music to be able to talk to us today and give us some of his wisdom. We mentioned in the video we met when we were pretty young, and we came up through the ranks together in the studio scene in LA and then eventually in touring groups. So if you'd like to take some lessons on my master classes, you can go to fretfrenz.com. That's FERTFRENZ.com. And you can subscribe to either a month or a year's membership there. There's a free 24-hour trial period for those of you that would like to check it out. So for now, just remember to stay tuned always, and we really enjoy being able to bring these to you on my YouTube channel, Fret Friends Playlist. But for now, see you later, and thanks for tuning in.